Hey, No Why listeners, let's talk about AI. Let's talk about social isolation. Let's talk about cutting people off from loved ones. All of these things we've been talking about over the past few weeks. And guess what? They're related, and they relate to what I want to talk about today, which is an article that I saw in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. You may have seen this, and if you haven't, you're probably going to want to check it out after the episode because we're going to talk about robot pets and all of the implications. I'm just going to cut to the chase here. I think that this is a bad idea for humanity. And I think the fact that we are even seeing these kinds of products emerge right now really shows where we are as a society. So hopefully we can really get down to the why in this episode, why this is a problem for us and maybe what we can do about it, or to at least resist some of these trends of these products that I think are really bad for humans. So let's jump into it. First of all, do you remember the Roomba? You probably do. Maybe you even have one in your home. It's the little robot vacuum that you turn on and it goes around your house and it vacuums for you. For a long time, I wanted one of these because it just seemed so convenient. I don't really want one anymore for a lot of reasons. But anyways, the inventor of the Roomba, it was invented by the company iRobot. And at the time, the CEO of that company was Colin Angle. Well, he is up to a new venture now. He calls it the Familiar. It is this thing right here. If you're watching, you can see a little screenshot up on the screen of a rather large dog-like machine or robot. It's covered in soft fur. It's has these big camera eyes that are actually cameras, but these big black eyes with eyelashes that actually look really sweet. It looks cute, I hate to say. It looks really cute, and it just kind of looks like this very friendly creature. It's kind of like an animatronic, like it moves and things like that. And so this is what he is developing. You can see the picture if you're listening. When you click on the show notes and look at some of the links, you can look at the picture for yourself. But this is what he has called the Familiar. Now, it's a prototype. It's not for sale to the public yet, but this is what he's been developing. And here is his reasoning. This is a quote from the article in the Wall Street Journal. I want to build a relationship between human and machine that is fundamentally different than the relationship between the Roomba and a customer. I want to feel like the machine I'm building actually cares about me. Now, let's note here, as the Wall Street Journal does, that the Familiar is the same term which is used for their supernatural animal companions. I'm just throwing that out there. We don't need to dig into it right now, but you can marinate on that if you want to. It's meant to be, and I'm reading from the article here, the first in a new category of emotionally intelligent robots trained to respond appropriately to our tone of voice, body language, and overall vibe. This connection would enable robots to act in support roles that require high levels of trust. Okay, now, obviously, the article notes this, and we've noted this multiple times on the No Why podcast. We see a lot of problems when people develop these emotional bonds or symbiotic relationships with AI and chatbots. And we've seen it be manipulative. We've seen people fall in love with AI. We've seen AI chatbots convince people to do horrible things, including harming themselves and others and killing themselves even. There are lawsuits going on. So this has been generally recognized as a problem when people develop these kind of emotional connections with chatbots, even though it is more common than just like, oh, somebody who is already mentally unstable. So this has been reported on a lot. But Angle here says that he actually wants people to bond with his machines. He said people will and should know that they're interacting with a machine. But I think most of us feel warmth and connection to objects in our lives. I'm particularly fond of pens. Okay, let me just pause right there. He's saying that he's particularly fond of certain objects. Well, I am too. I like this pen, the Sharpie pens. I'm not being paid, but they're my favorite right now. And so, yeah, we like certain objects, but that's totally different because this is inanimate. In no way, shape, or form is it ever going to start talking to me. If it did, I would probably need to perform an exorcism because this is an object, right? It's not, I don't expect it to have a relationship with me or to respond intelligently to my body language or overall vibes as this product is supposed to do. People like Sam Altman or Dario Amodei or these, CEOs of these AI companies, they're not as explicit about you wanting to form an emotional bond with their product, but in reality they do. I think Mr. Engel here is just saying the quiet part out loud that of course he wants you to bond with his product. And of course they want you to bond with the chatbot that you're using. They want you to feel like you can trust it. Otherwise, you'll stop using it. And if they're designing a product, well, they're only going to make money if people keep using their product. So of course they want you to bond with it. And that's why I think so much of this is so tricky and that we have to be discerning when we think about this. But these large language models, and let me be clear that the familiar, like this little robotic pet, is not a large language model because it doesn't actually speak, so it doesn't have that function. But these things that are meant to be, quote, intelligent and respond to you in an intelligent manner, whether that's like a pet or like somebody talking with you through a computer screen, they are designed to simulate a real relationship, whether with a person or an animal, some kind of, being, some kind of living intelligent companion. That's what they're supposed to simulate. So that is fundamentally different than an inanimate object that you might have a particular liking for. So for him to even use that analogy, I think is just like, I don't think he's even being intellectually honest in that. And I think he's probably smart enough to know that. So anyways, in summing up his aspirations, once again, I'm reading from Wall Street Journal here, Engel mentions the film Jurassic Park. To him, the white-bearded CEO who revived the dinosaurs is unfairly characterized. Here's a quote from Colin Engel. To me, he's the hero of that movie, not the villain, because he was trying to take something that was always smoke and mirrors and turn it into something magical and real. That's some of the sentiment behind what we're doing. And then the article ends, hopefully the familiar machine story has a different ending. Yeah, because if you've seen Jurassic Park, then you know that John Hammond's aspirations, well-intentioned as they may have been, were very ill-advised. This is like kind of the point of the whole movie, the original one anyway. I've seen some of the sequels, but it's that you can't try to control nature like this. It's going to end badly. I just think that that's kind of strange that that character is his hero that he's trying to emulate. Because there are a lot of reasons that I think are pretty common sense, pretty plain to see where this could go wrong. And that's what I want to get into for the next part of this episode. So one concern mentioned in the Wall Street Journal article is, of course, privacy. And this is also one of the reasons that I have a problem with Roomba now, because there was a recent story where some guy accidentally, air quotes, hacked into like thousands of these robot vacuums, because they have to have sensors and cameras and things like that to be able to navigate your home. And so there's big privacy concerns there, which maybe people didn't really think about when they first came out. But if somebody is able to hack into that, then they can see into people's homes. And this guy proved that. And it was a big news story a couple months ago. And so this machine, this robot that's in your home as a companion or a pet, if you want to call it that, is looking with its eyes, which are cameras, to evaluate you and your body language, like it said, and your tone of voice. And so it's hearing things, it's seeing things. And again, like I'm sure they're going to say that they are putting privacy protections in and all that. But I think anything like that, you do have to talk about the potential for it to be hacked or there to be, something to go wrong anytime that you're giving something that level of access to you in your household and your private space all the time. But what I really want to focus on besides that is why does a company or an inventor think that there is even a market for something like this? Why is there even a need? If it's that crazy and weird, and you would say people aren't even going to buy this, but clearly they think that people are, and I think that people are going to be interested in buying this. And part of that has to do with the fact that we are becoming more isolated as individuals in society. So I'm going to pull on a commentary from Point of View's Kirby Anderson. So I work with Point of View Radio Talk Show, which is actually the parent organization of the Know Why podcast. And Kirby's the host of Point of View, and he has these daily viewpoint commentaries. And I'm going to quote from him here. This is a recent one. We were told that sometime in the future, perhaps around the year 2040, something profound would happen. Deaths in the U.S. would outnumber births. Unfortunately, the date will be much closer than we expected. According to the Congressional Budget Office, that dismal demographic will arrive around 2030. So you've probably seen headlines about the fertility crisis, and how we're already as a nation below the replacement rate, which is 2.1 births per woman, which just means that as a society, you are replacing yourself. You're not dying out. Well, we're already not replacing ourselves in America. Now, not only are we not replacing ourselves, we're really close to deaths outnumbering births. This has already happened in China. Okay, so here's a quote from Newsweek from a recent report. About 2/3 of the world's population now live in regions where the total fertility rate is below the 2.1 births per woman needed to sustain a population naturally. China's rate is among the world's lowest, hovering at near 1.0, so just like fertility rate of one child per woman. And last year, deaths outnumbered births for the third consecutive year in China, despite a raft of policies introduced to encourage larger families. So what is the problem? There are a lot of problems that come with an aging society where, besides the eventual problem of the society not existing anymore, then you have more immediate problems where you have more of an older population, more older people than younger people. So eventually this means you're going to have more retirees than employees. So older people are either not going to have a safety net in which to retire because the working population is going to be so burdened that there won't be enough money, there won't be enough work and labor to supply that safety net. And so you might have people that are working older or not able to retire. They're working into older ages. And then you're going to have a care shortage because you don't really have to worry as much about child care shortage, but elder care shortage. And so you have a smaller and smaller working population to supply the care for elder relatives, to supply the earnings needed to even fund any sort of social safety net. And so this becomes a real burden on a society that is lopsided like this, where people, as they age, they're not able to access the kind of care that they need, and the country really can't support them. Now, we're talking about like financial support and just like daily care for an aging population. But what about social support? This is already a problem where people tend to be, more isolated as they age. And back in 2023, another article from the Wall Street Journal was actually advocating for using early versions of AI chatbots and little robots and VR headsets to keep older adults company. So this has already been a trend, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a way that, grandma in the nursing home can have a companion, and we can, use this to help the older populations. And now here's another product that I guarantee you is going to be marketed toward that demographic, in addition to potentially other demographics as well. And another reason why I think this is going to continue to be an issue is even though we are seeing lots of headlines about the fertility crisis, we're seeing headlines about low marriage rates, and that's something that I've talked about on the Know Why podcast, and I talk about it at Point of View even more often. We're not really seeing cultural changes or changes in attitude yet on any sort of scale. In fact, there's a new study, and I'll link this. I'm going to quote from Christian Post here, which reported on it. But Gen Z thinks that you can have a fulfilling life without family and children. Based on a complete sample of more than 3,500 adults interviewed in August of 2024, 74% of Gen Z respondents say they can have a fulfilling life without children, the highest share of any generation. Around two-thirds, 67%, say marriage is important for raising children in a stable environment, the lowest share among generations. Now, of course, you can have a fulfilling life without marriage and parenthood because we see examples of that in the Bible. God doesn't give those gifts to everybody. They're not rights. They're not commodities. A spouse and children are gifts. But the secular culture has been lying and is still lying about what in general makes people happy because statistically, people who are married and have children are happier and more fulfilled than people who don't. And so if that is not something that God has in store for you, but you are following Him, you're living in rich Christian community, and you are finding your purpose and identity in the Lord, and you end up being single for your whole life, that doesn't mean you can't live a fulfilling life. But if people are buying the lie that that family is not a good thing, but it's actually a hindrance to their personal happiness, and that they will find more fulfillment being just completely independent and autonomous of any sort of social connections or duties or responsibilities, that leads to unhappiness. And so let's talk about what happens in the long term, because a lot of people who are thinking about, I'm starting out at my career, I want to travel, I want to do all these things, and they're thinking about what's going to make them happy in the here and now, might not be thinking about the future. So here's a sobering look at who you'll be spending time with as you age. If you're listening, I'm showing a graphic and you can see it if you click on the link that shows who you spend time with as you get older. Okay, this is from a group called Our World in Data. The graph, to just kind of describe it, is showing that when people are around 30 to 50, 60 years old, they're spending a lot of time with their coworkers. Time spent with children spikes around between starting in your mid-20s through kind of like your 50s, and then it goes down. So maybe think about the typical 18 or so years that you're going to be raising a child. And then at that same time, your time with coworkers spikes up, but around 60, it starts to fall off and gets to basically zero once you're in like the 70 and the 80 range. Your partner becomes the top person from really about mid-50s all the way through 80, according to this average that an individual is going to be spending time with. But what really climbs like crazy is people spending that time alone, which it starts to spike at around their 40s. So the Brad Wilcox, who I've cited many times, he's with the Institute for Family Studies, he said, just remember, your coworkers will not be there for you in the last chapter of your life. And that's true. So again, that doesn't mean that, God's plan is the same for everybody, but you are going to need people there at the end of your life, somebody to care for you. And the reality is more and more people are not building the kind of lives right now, or even, including with family or even just social connection in general. I mean, the last episode, just last week, I was talking about how many millennials and Gen Z are cutting people out of their life over disagreements. The habits that young people have right now are not building the kind of life that means they are going to have somebody with them in the last stage of their life. That's like, you are not seeing people build families. You are not seeing people maintain a strong, close circle of connection with either extended family or communities. You're seeing more isolation, falling birth rate, all of these things that mean if these trends continue, you're going to have more people who are alone as they age. And we don't have to imagine what that's going to be like. You can look at other places in the world where they're years ahead of us and it's already happening. And we are on the same trajectory. Well, now look, the door's wide open for a whole market of robot companions, robot pets. And if we think that that is the solution, then we've got it all backwards, okay? Because that can't be the solution. Maybe there's a very limited space for robots in a society, like helping with basic household tasks. And that's the thing. It's like, I've heard so many people say this, where's the robot that's going to wash my dishes? Instead, we're seeing people use chatbots to write for them and replace their own ability to be creative, or to replace companionship, replace pets, for crying out loud. Like, we're not even talking about people. We're saying like replacing animals, which God gave us to take care of. So why are robots replacing these things? Why can't you have a robot that like does housework or folds laundry? But anyway, maybe there's a place for things like that. And I know that in very like, particular situations, things like the realistic baby dolls have, I think, been helpful for people with maybe advanced dementia and nursing homes and things like that. But that's maybe a very limited use case scenario, to kind of use the tech term that they're using, like the use case, okay? But just sending these, robot dogs out to market and being like, hey, we want you to bond with them in a society where fewer people are getting married, fewer people are having children, fewer people are building the kinds of rich communities of social connection and meaningful friendships and relationships, where you have a lower fertility rate, fewer people to actually care for older people, fewer people to be able to even have older relatives to take care of, or younger relatives to take care of them, then yeah, you're going to see more of these kinds of companions, again, air quotes, that are marketed toward people who are alone and just don't want to be lonely. Now, I do want to note that statistically, aloneness does not necessarily equate loneliness. So somebody could live alone and still have the kind of meaningful connections with other individuals, like friends or family members who that really do benefit you, because feeling lonely means like the lack of meaningful connection. So just because somebody lives alone doesn't technically mean that they're lonely, but clearly we see the trends here, right? And we do see that more and more people are talking about being lonely, okay? So this is what bothers me about so many of the tech companies and the AI products that are being pushed, is that they're not being pushed for, like I said, the washing dishes use case, or the let the robots carry your groceries in so that you can go in and spend more time playing with your kids. I mean, some of the, I guess, arguments for like using agentic AI like Claude Code and things like that are falling along those lines of argument. So in general, though, we are seeing a lot of these products being pushed for, or proposed for, like mental health support for kids at school who need a counselor, but there's a shortage of school counselors. That was another Wall Street Journal article I talked about on the Know Why podcast. Or a friend for kids who don't fit in. I've talked about this product. It's the necklace that you wear that preemptively texts you. And guess who the first major person that they featured as a customer using this thing was in one of their big ads? It was a 16-year-old boy who said he didn't fit in with his crowd of peers at school and was always a little different. So did the peers at school become more accommodating of him? Did they accept him? Did he find a buddy that he could connect with? No. He got a robot necklace that talks to him. And that's how they're advertising it. And that's supposed to make us like this product? Or a pet, like this familiar for seniors who live alone and need something to bond with. These are the propositions. And I just think that we need to say no, because those things aren't solving the root problems of mental health issues or support needed for those issues, or real friends, and our society being more open to actually having friendships and people that are outside of our echo chamber and building those connections instead of cutting people off who maybe make us, disagree with them, or our duty as a society to care for our elders. We need people as human beings, and this goes back to what I've talked about so many times, is that God created us in his image. That means we're relational. We flourish when we are in meaningful relationship with other people. And it sure seems like a big part of this latest tech boom on all the AI products that are coming out are bent on exploiting our lack of connection and relationship and worsening it, not actually solving it. So again, I just think we really have to resist this. But if we want to do that, we have to resist the lie. We have to go back to what I talked about when I reviewed The Dignity of Dependence by Leah Libresco Sargent. As a culture, we've been taught a lie that other people, other responsibilities, and connections, they burden us, that they're an impediment to our autonomy and our independence and our freedom and our ability to find fulfillment out there in the world doing something for me. But if you look at research, if you look at the Global Flourishing study, if you look at social science, if you look at the Bible, you see that what actually makes people fulfilled is connecting with one, God. Okay, so people who actually have a strong spiritual belief and tradition and religion that they're a part of, they tend to be happier. And people who have strong social connections. Go look at the episode I did on the Global Flourishing study. Look at Arthur Brooks' research. Okay, this is not up for debate. That's what makes people happy. That's what you need to flourish in life, okay? You need a belief system. You need connection. And that's not what we're getting in the way that this is trending. It's not these kinds of products that are being pushed as some sort of solutions. Now they're just coming out and saying, yeah, we want you to bond with a machine. Though that's not what we need. That's not going to fill the void that human beings have because we're made in God's image. It's just not. But as a culture, we have to stop telling the lie that our fulfillment is in independence and autonomy, because that is what's leading people to delay marriage or forgo it altogether, or not want to have kids because it's like, ew, I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to have to make sacrifices to love somebody. Oh, sorry, that's just the thing that gives your life meaning. And we've told everybody, though, that that's a bad thing that's going to hold them back and make them unhappy. If we want to avoid a future where we see senior citizens and others who are isolated and alone, if we want to avoid a future where they're just kind of put in a room in a facility somewhere and given a robot dog to keep them company, then we have to be intentional about avoiding that. I think we have to, again, refute that lie about our fulfillment and happiness being found in autonomy, and allow ourselves to be stretched, even uncomfortable at times, and take on more burdens. That means taking on bigger roles and caring for aging family members. I mean, this used to be normal. There's all kinds of history that we could talk about multi-generational households and the benefits of that, where, you've got the grandmother and, the baby and the kids and the working parents, and everybody's together as a unit. We're so separated now. But even, reaching out to lonely people that might be in your community, like in your church, seniors who maybe they don't have any family that live nearby, or single parents who don't have a really strong support system. And yeah, be friendly at church or when you see them out and about, but have you thought about inviting them over for dinner? Or involving them in your family's like Thanksgiving celebration or holidays? Make them a part of your life. That's what we're supposed to do as the body of Christ. And maybe this is probably a conversation for another episode, but we've got housing crisis. We've got young people who aren't able to break into home ownership because of all these economic factors. And we've got, an aging society and lower fertility rates. Do we need to bring back multi-generational households? Not as like, oh, that's, interesting that your family's choosing to live that way, but as just the norm. Do we need to bring back those kinds of situations where everybody in the family has more support, and yeah, you're depending on each other and you're helping each other, but you have more support just built in, and that becomes a norm and not the exception to the rule? There's some reporting on this that people are kind of leaning this way, but I think it needs to become part of the conversation again. So anyways, with Mr. Engel and his familiar robot situation, let's just use discernment. I'll let you decide whether or not you want to read a whole lot into him choosing terms like the familiar for his product, or comparing himself to John Hammond in Jurassic Park and saying that he's the hero of that movie franchise. But I think at the very least, it shows maybe a lack of judgment and discernment about what's good for humanity. I think in general, though, we need to remember that humans need people, and it all goes back to how we were made and how we were designed. And if we accept that and understand it, it makes a lot of things more clear. And let's not rush to accept a society where a robot dog thing is the solution for people who are lonely. Step up and be the person that the lonely person in your life needs. And I'll leave you with that until next time on the Know Why podcast.